our topic is about the reversible and irreversible cellular injury. And in the last video, we have discussed the mechanisms of cellular injury. So let's continue. First of all, the cellular injury occurs as a result of hypoxia or ischemia. It can be due to any reason. It can be due to biological factors, mechanical trauma, or it can be iatrogenic causes. We don't know about the cause. So let's discuss about the reversible and irreversible cellular injuries. Okay, as you all know that oxidative phosphorylation occurs in the mitochondria, and for its occurrence we need ATP. Okay, and we also needs oxygen. So, when there is hypoxia, the oxygen level in the blood is very low, or it can be due to ischemia, or it can be due to the disability of hemoglobin to carry oxygen. So, it results in the oxidative phosphorylation dysfunction, and when it occurs, it leads to the less amount of ATP. And you know that ATP is required for the normal functioning of the cell, and it is required for many pumps, for example sodium and potassium pump. These pumps normally they transport 3 sodium out and 2 potassium into the cell to maintain their intracellular extracellular levels. But in case of low ATP, it leads to the sodium influx. Sodium is a very powerful ion, and it attracts the water due to its ability to attract the water. And when the sodium is inside the cell in higher concentration, it attracts the water and results in the cellular swelling. Also, there is a pump, the calcium pump, and the intracellular levels of calcium should be maintained very low. Okay, very low. They should be maintained in a very low concentration. But when these pump fail because they are processing under the ATP, and we have discussed that ATP is reduced due to any reason, so it results in the calcium influx and calcium buildup inside the cell. And also the third consequence of the cellular injury is anaerobic glycolysis when there is no ATP. Okay, so, when there is no oxygen, the aerobic glycolysis cannot occur, and the cells shift towards the anaerobic glycolysis. Anaerobic means that no oxygen. So, in case of anaerobic glycolysis, the lactic acid is produced from the glucose, and lactic acid builds up inside the cell, and the name suggests that it's an acid, so it lowers the pH, and lowering the pH has the consequence in denaturation of the protein and the DNA inside the cell. It results in the protein denaturation and also DNA clumping or nuclear clumping. So these are three, we can say, the consequences of hypoxia. First of all is the oxidative phosphorylation cannot occur, in which the result is ATP reduction. The ATP reduction leads to sodium potassium pump dysfunction, calcium pump dysfunction, and shifts to the anaerobic glycolysis. So, what are the hallmarks of reversible cellular injury? Reversible cellular injury, it's an initial step of the cellular injury. It's reversible in case when the insult or the stress is prevented. The cell can return to its original state. The function and the structure are included in that. But hallmarks of the reversible cellular injury is cellular swelling. As I have mentioned that cellular swelling is the main hallmark for the reversible cellular injury. It occurs due to the influx of water. Why the influx of water? Because the pumps are not functioning. Sodium potassium pump is not functioning and calcium pump is not functioning. As a result, the ions build up inside the cell and they attract the water. The cellular swelling has its own consequences. For example, they result in the loss of microvilli and membrane blabbing. The cytosol swells up. So, what do you expect? Of course, the membrane starts to blab, to form the blabbing, and loss of microvilli. The cells have microvilli over their surfaces, so when there is swelling, of course, it's a general thinking that when something swells up, it starts to lose the structures above its surface. Okay, and also the swelling of rough endoplasmic reticulum, it's RER, and when the RER starts to swells up, it results in the dissociation of ribosomes. When ribosome starts to dislocate or dissociate from the surface of RER, it results in decreased protein synthesis. Because ribosomes are directly involved in the protein synthesis, protein manufacturing, protein factory, but when ribosomes are dissociated, it results in less protein synthesis or loss of protein synthesis. Let's move on towards the hallmarks of irreversible cellular injury. Irreversible cellular injury is the late step of the cellular injury, and the hallmark is the membrane damage. Membrane damage, it can be of any membrane, the plasma membrane, mitochondrial membrane, lysosomal membrane. These three membranes are very, very important, and these have to be remain intact in order for the normal functioning of the cell. In case of damage to the plasma membrane, many cytosolic enzymes, and the enzymes are present in the cytosol of the cell. When plasma membrane becomes damaged, the cytosolic enzyme leak into the serum. Serum means the blood, the plasma. And for example, in case of myocardial infarction, cardiac troponins, okay, cardiac troponins are enzymes. In case of MI, they leak out into the blood. In case of hepatic failure, we can see ALT and AST, aspartate transaminase and alanine transaminase, to be leak out into the blood. Okay, and in case of plasma membrane damage, the next consequence is calcium entering into the cell. And why the mentioning calcium, why not sodium? Sodium is involved in the cellular swelling, but calcium has another function. It is an activator of many enzymes. For example, endonucleases, for example, proteases. The calcium is involved in the activation of enzymes. Okay, and it starts their functioning. For example, protease, it starts to digest the cytoskeleton of the cell, because cytoskeleton of the cell is made up of proteins, myofibrils, okay, the intermediate filaments, okay. And in case of mitochondrial damage, we know that the inner mitochondrial membrane contains electron transport chain on which the oxidative phosphorylation occurs. But in case of mitochondrial damage, there is loss of ETC. ETC means electron transport chain. And when there is loss of ETC, of course, oxidative phosphorylation cannot occur and ATP cannot be produced. The next consequence for the mitochondrial damage is the leaking of cytochrome C, and I cannot stress it enough that cytochrome C is a major triggering factor for apoptosis. When cytochrome C leaks into the cytosol, it starts to activate the apoptosis. It starts to activate the caspases, which are the main enzymes for apoptosis. Okay. In case of lysosomal membrane damage, as you know that the lysosome contain many hydrolytic enzymes. Hydrolytic enzymes, when leak into the cytosol, they are activated by the calcium. As I have mentioned, that calcium activates the enzymes. When lysosomal membrane gets damaged, it leaks into the cytosol, and already present calcium there activates the enzymes. Okay, lysosome contain many enzymes, for example, proteases. It contains hydrolytic enzymes, cathepsin. These all are enzyme that starts to digest the cell itself, and the end results, what would you expect? It's the cell death. Okay, this is a diagrammatic representation of the reversible and irreversible injury. In case of reversible, the cell size is increased. The chromatin starts to clump because of the lowering of pH as a result of anaerobic glycolysis. as I mentioned, swelling of ER and mitochondria. Small amorphous deposits, it means that in the mitochondria, due to the calcium influx, small amorphous deposits are formed in the mitochondria. Membrane blebs due to the cellular swelling. Myelin figures can also be seen, and intracytoplasmic vacuoles are pinched off segments of ER. As I've mentioned that ER also swells up, so intracytoplasmic vacuoles are formed and detachment of ribosomes. These are some general schematic representation what happens in the reversible injury. In case of irreversible injury, there is breakdown of plasma membrane, okay, and organelles and nucleus also breaks down, leakage of the contents, okay, and inflammation. It's a host reaction. In case of necrosis, necrosis is followed by inflammation, but apoptosis is not followed by inflammation. It's very, very important to remember that. We'll cover necrosis in just a minute. Okay. Cell death. Cell death, the hallmark for the cell death is the loss of nucleus. Okay, loss of nucleus. This is the hallmark for the cell death. And the hallmark for irreversible cellular injury is the membrane damage. For reversible, it's cellular swelling, and for cell death, it's loss of nucleus. What are the mechanism by which cell loses its nucleus? It's by the nuclear condensation. Nuclear condensation means pycnosis, fragmentation means karyoraxis, and dissolution means karyolysis. These steps are to be remembered, and these follow the same mechanisms like pycnosis, karyoraxis, and karyolysis. Okay, this is the sequential steps for the loss of nucleus and nucleus degradation, you can say. Okay, our next topic is on the necrosis, and in the next video we will cover the apoptosis, but for today it's necrosis. Necrosis, the you can say that necrosis it's pathological process. Okay, it's occur in pathological conditions. It's never physiological. Our body never triggers necrosis in under the physiological circumstances. It's the death of large group of cells in contrast to apoptosis with a small group of cells. And necrosis is always followed by inflammation, and it's acute inflammation. Acute inflammation is the body's response to the necrosis, and inflammation occurs in two conditions. In case of infection, it can be viral or bacterial, and the second is the necrosis. Necrosis is always followed by inflammation. Okay, it's very important to understand. Types of necrosis, there are many types of necrosis, but here we will discuss the most important ones. The most important form of necrosis is coagulative necrosis. Coagulative necrosis, there are some you can say characteristics and properties for the coagulative necrosis. In the coagulative necrosis, the tissue of the necrosis remains firm. Why the necrotic tissue remain firm? It's due to the preservation. Okay, it's due to the preservation by coagulation of the proteins. Okay, for example, if the tissue undergoes coagulative necrosis, the structure and the cell shape are preserved due to the coagulation of proteins. The proteins undergo coagulation and the tissue structure is preserved and it's firm, but the nucleus disappears. And the coagulative necrosis is the ischemic infarction of any organ in the body except the brain. Ischemic infarction means that there is the hindrance or cut in the blood supply to the organ, and except the brain undergoes always liquefactive necrosis. Okay, diagram representing that this is the area of the coagulative necrosis of the kidney, and it's wedge shaped. Wedge shape means that it's triangle or pyramid shaped structure. It's the necrotic area in the microscopic examination, and it's the healthy kidney for the comparison purposes. Okay, why the area of the necrosis is wedge-shaped and pale. Um, the common understanding says that pale is due to the decreased in the oxygen and the blood supply to that area. And why it's wedge shaped, I will explain that. For example, if this particular area has a dual blood supply, it's the dual blood supply from the same source, okay, and this area undergoes obstruction. It can be due to thrombosis, it can be due to any reason. So this area and this area of the arteries are not supplying the blood to this area. As the result, this whole wedge-shaped area undergoes the process of necrosis, and it's pale and it's wedge-shaped. The second term we use is the red infarction. There is the paradox that there is an infarction, but why it's in red color? Red infarction arises in the organs where they have the tendency for the blood re-entrance and the loosely organized tissues. For example, in case of pulmonary or testicular infarctions, it means that lungs have the dual blood supply and testes are very loosely organized tissues. So I will explain that in case of testes, why the red infarction or hemorrhagic infarction of the testes occurs. For just imagine that it's scrotum. Inside the scrotum there are testes. It's supplied by the artery and it's drained by a vein, testicular artery and testicular vein. When in case of the hemorrhagic infarction, the cause for that is the twisted of the spermatid cord. It means that the twisting occurs at the point where the artery and vein are supplying and the testes. In case of the twisting, it results in the congestion of the vein. Maybe you can remember that in the previous lectures I have mentioned that ischemia can occur due to two causes. First is the thrombosis. It means that, for example, if this is an organ, okay, if there is blockage here, it means that there is thrombosis in the arterial blood supply. It can also result in ischemia. But the second cause is that if there is the venous congestion, okay, for example portal venous congestion, if there is the obstruction in the venous return, it also results in ischemia in the organ. In case of testicular infarction, the venous congestion occurs and arterial blood continues to enter, but here the oxygen starts to get slow, okay, because the venous return is obstructed. So in case it's the red color, red, it imparts the red color due to the arterial blood continuing to enter the testes, but due to the obstruction in the venous return, it results in the ischemia, and ischemia results in necrosis. Understand? And this the red infarction of the lungs and the testicles. The second type of necrosis is the liquefactive necrosis. Liquefactive necrosis means that the enzymatic lysis of the cells and proteins. For example, the brain, we have put an example that the ischemia of the brain undergoes liquefactive necrosis. Why liquefactive? Because the proteolytic enzymes from the microglial cells. What are microglial cells? Microglial cells are the brain resident macrophages. Means that there are many tissues and cells that have their own macrophages. These are called as tissue resident macrophages. For example, in case of liver, we have Kupffer cells. Kupffer cells are the liver resident macrophages. In case of brain, these are the microglial cells. Proteolytic enzymes from the microglial cells liquefy the brain. Okay, this the enzymatic lysis of the brain occurs. This is liquefactive necrosis. The second example is the abscess. In the abscess, we always see liquefactive necrosis. The example for an abscess is that from the neutrophils secretes the proteolytic enzymes which liquefy the tissue. Neutrophils also contain proteolytic enzymes that starts to um, digest the tissue. This third example is pancreatitis. Pancreas undergoes two types of necrosis. First is the liquefactive necrosis and second is the fat necrosis. We'll discuss in a minute. But in case of the liquefactive necrosis of the pancreas, the proteolytic enzymes, as you know that pancreas is packed with proteolytic enzymes. For example, um, the amylases and other proteolytic enzymes, starts to liquefy the pancreas parenchyma. It means that these enzymes are activated inside the pancreas, and when they are activated inside the pancreas, this starts to digest the pancreas itself. So pancreas undergoes liquefactive necrosis in this condition. The third the type of necrosis is gangrenous necrosis. Gangrenous necrosis are also of two types. It can be dry gangrene and it also can be wet gangrene. Gangrenous necrosis, it resembles a mummified tissue. You can see a mummified tissue is very dry and it is like rough. Okay, it's the dry gangrene. The examples are the lower limbs, mostly in case of the ischemia of the lower limbs and GIT tract. They can undergo gangrenous necrosis. For example, the patients who have diabetes in case of occlusion of the popliteal artery, you know that popliteal artery supplies the lower limb with the blood, but in case of thrombosis or occlusion of popliteal artery, it leads to the ischemia of the lower limbs, and in case of ischemia of lower limbs, it leads to the necrosis. What kind of necrosis? It's the gangrenous necrosis, but it's dry gangrene. Okay, but when the gangrene is superimposed by any kind of infection, for example the bacterial infection can superimposed onto the tissue that is already dead, it results in the liquefactive necrosis. Okay, and in this condition we say that the patient has wet gangrene in case of superimposed infection. This is an area you can see that it's undergone the gangrenous necrosis, and the diagrammatic representation of gangrenous necrosis, it's that it's demarcated from the normal tissue, from the healthy tissue. It means that there is the line for the demarcation from the normal healthy tissue and the gangrenous tissue. But in case of wet gangrene, there is no specific line for demarcation. It's like mixed with the normal skin and the normal tissues. Moving on, it's the caseous necrosis. Okay, the caseous necrosis, it's the soft necrotic tissue, and you can see that it's like a cottage cheese like appearance. Cottage cheese, you have seen that it's like this. You can see in the diagram that it's the cottage cheese like appearance, and the caseous necrosis is combination of both. It is a combination of liquefactive as well as the coagulative necrosis. And the examples for the caseous necrosis is the granulomatous inflammation in case of tuberculosis or fungal infections. Okay, you need to remember that in case of caseous necrosis, we can see a cottage cheese-like appearance, and it occurs in the granulomatous inflammation and due to tuberculosis or fungal infection. Moving on is the fat necrosis. As I have told you that pancreas also involved in the fat necrosis. Let's see how. But first of all, the characteristics for the fat necrosis is the chalky white appearance. Chalky white appearance. Okay. And why a chalky white appearance occurs? It's due to the deposition of the calcium in the fat. The examples is the trauma to the fat. The breast has many adipose tissues, okay, and around the pancreas there is also peripancreatic fat. You know that peripancreatic fat around the pancreas, and in case of the breast, these both can undergo fat necrosis. How do the fat necrosis occurs? fat necrosis in case of pancreas occurs that in case of pancreatitis, the enzymes are leaked outside and this starts to digest the peripancreatic fat. There is a term used in the fat necrosis, it's known as the saponification. Saponification is a process in which the fatty acids which are released by the fats, they combine with the calcium. And it's the same process used in the industries to make soap. Okay, and they are joined with the calcium, and this process is known as the saponification. um, there are two terms also used, the dystrophic calcification and metastatic calcification. What are the difference between them? In case of dystrophic calcification, it means that the serum level, the body level for the calcium and the phosphate are normal, in the normal range. In the blood, we cannot see higher level of calcium and phosphate, but calcium starts to deposit on the dead tissues. For example, in necrotic tissues, and they starts to undergo the process of saponification, combining with the fat. Okay, it's the dystrophic calcification. The necrotic area becomes the nidus. Nidus means a nest for the calcification. But in case of metastatic calcification, it means that the serum level for the calcium and phosphate are already high. It means that the calcium starts to deposit in the normal tissues. Okay, do you understand the difference between these two? Dystrophic means that normal serum calcium, but the calcium starts to deposit on the dead tissues. But in case of metastatic calcification, the serum levels are high and it starts to deposit in the normal tissues. What are the examples of metastatic calcification? In case of hyperparathyroidism, it's the disease of the parathyroid gland in which the parathyroid hormone, the level it's increased. And what is the function for the parathyroid hormone? It increases the blood calcium level. When the blood calcium level rises, it leads to the deposition of calcium in normal tissues. The example is nephrocalcinosis. It means that calcium starts to deposit in the kidney. Under normal conditions, it's the normal tissue. Kidney is healthy, but in case of metastatic calcification, there is no other choice that calcium starts to deposit in healthy tissues, the normal tissues. Last but not the least is the fibrinoid necrosis of the vessel walls. It means that the blood vessels, mostly arteries, undergoes the necrotic damage in their walls. And when there is damage to the walls, what would you expect? It's the leaking of proteins into the vessel wall, and the fibrin is one of the proteins. But the microscopically, it results in the eosinophilic dark bright pink color staining of the wall microscopically. Okay, fibrinonecrosis, it's a very important form of necrosis in which the blood vessel wall undergoes necrosis. And what are the causes for the fibrinonecrosis? It can be due to the vasculitis, inflammation of the vessel walls, and it can be due to the malignant hypertension. And in case of malignant hypertension, it's the, you know that hypertension can be of two types. It's benign and it can be malignant. Malignant means that it's the more severe form. It can be a medical emergency and it damages the vital organs, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the liver. It can damage these. Okay, having discussed these all, there is a clinical scenario that I would like to present here. Okay, a 30-year-old woman, just focus on the word woman, the gender, is present with a fibrinoid necrosis. What would be the cause? Would you expect that the woman of 30-year-old would have malignant hypertension or vasculitis? I think no. In a 30-year-old woman, the malignant hypertension and vasculitis chances are very low. But this woman is also pregnant. And in the pregnant woman, there is a condition known as eclampsia. Pregnancy eclampsia is a very dangerous and fatal condition for both the woman and the fetus. And eclampsia, it is due to the hypertension. It's followed by the hypertension, okay, and it's followed by edema, organ dysfunction, and proteinuria. These are four characteristics for the eclampsia, and eclampsia occurs in the final trimesters of pregnancy, and it's very dangerous situation in these days. But in case of women who is present with the fibrinoid necrosis, the cause would be eclampsia always. Okay, just remember this. So we have covered the forms of necrosis, we have covered the reversible and irreversible cellular injury and their diagrammatic representation as well. So in